I'm Dr. Christopher Barker. Welcome to Holding Space, or welcome back to Holding Space if you're coming back. If you like these videos, I invite you to subscribe or like as many times as possible. Leave comments. Love getting those because they show me that you have some interest in something. It also gives me some ideas of things to do for the future. I am about providing some sort of dialogue and education on psychological topics. I've been a psychologist in New Jersey for about at least 25 years. I don't like to look back and count, but it's at least that long. And I want to be able to address topics that are of interest to you. So let me know what's going on and send me an email, a message, and we can try to get to some of those topics. The one that I did recently on spectrum disorders and relationships was really popular, and I am really glad to see that because it indicates that this is something that people are really interested in and find a need to learn more about. So it gives me some idea of perhaps doing more about it in the future. Let me know what you'd like to see. I did get a few comments from people about questioning, whether they're on the spectrum, or also I talked about bipolar disorder as a spectrum disorder, and that is also a valid point that I think involves some investigating. Some of the takes that I have on things are a little unusual, but some of them are kind of commonplace, but nonetheless, you get my perspective and the benefit of my years of experience. Today, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about transactional analysis. And I say a little bit more because if anybody has seen me in person, they know that inevitably this comes up whenever we talk about relationships, whenever we talk about parent-child relationships, whenever we talk about love relationships. Transactional analysis still plays a part. I understand it's still being taught in schools. It was invented by Eric Berne in the 1950s, and it was a way of looking at ego states and how people relate to each other from different perspectives. If you have complementary perspectives, good communication takes place. If you don't have good relationships, if you don't have good transactions, then bad communication takes place, and it can really mess up a relationship and you're not really sure what's happening. I always draw this on the board because it's one of those things that has to be drawn on the board, really. If you know me, you know I'm famous for having my whiteboard in my office, and I'm always drawing things on it to illustrate. But transactional analysis talks about there being basically three ego states. There's the parent, and here's the other person that you're relating to. There's the adult and child. So that's parent, adult, child. Now, these are patterns that we've learned from other people. These are patterns that we've picked up throughout life. The parent state involves what we've learned about nurturing, but also about rules and conscience and morality. So frequently the parent state is going to be directive, and it's going to be moralistic, and sometimes it will be nurturing in a loving and secure holding kind of way. But I think more often than not, we'll find that the parent is coming down on the other ego states. So if you are dealing with your boss, this is you right here being an adult, but your boss is probably coming from the parent state because they're directive. They're telling you what to do, they're telling you how to do it, and sometimes that can come across very unpleasant. And it's really part of the relationship, though, so it's not really something that can change easily. But in an average relationship, if you are in your adult state and you're trying to talk to your partner as an adult, but they're coming from a very needy place where they're feeling that their needs are not being met, that they want something, because the child state wants what it wants when it wants it. And so they may be talking back to you from this state. And you're wondering what's going on because you're talking to them like an adult, but they're persisting on talking about what their needs are. You may therefore find yourself drifting up into this parent state and trying to get control of them and tell them what to do and change them, but that's not necessarily going to help. In fact, it's probably going to go very, very badly for you. Sometimes people argue and they are child to child. They are fighting, quarreling. The relationship gets complicated, but it doesn't get resolved. because arguments between children tend to not get resolved very well. And people wonder why. And frequently that's why this is happening. I tell people sometimes if you find that you're in a child to child relationship with someone, or if you find you're in a child to child dialogue with people, try to see what's happening, move yourself up into the adult state, and try and talk to the other person adult to adult. It may take them a while, but they will gradually move up to respond to you. This corresponds a little bit to what Marshall and Ann talked about with dialectical behavior therapy. We have emotional mind, we have logical mind, and we have wise mind. This corresponds to wise mind because it is neither totally emotional and not totally logical either. Adults are egos. This is the ego state. This corresponds to the superego state in Freudian terminology, and this is your id. But you are dealing with people from a variety of perspectives. And if you do not know what's happening, if you persist in trying to push adult conversation with someone who is really just stuck down here, and they are talking back to you as though you are a parent, you're going to find yourself repeating those dynamics. And repeating those dynamics as a child arguing with a parent, well, then that's going to push you eventually up into the parent state, and you're going to be talking back to the person as though they're a child. You can see this in relationships when people are when they're running against, up against the same topic over and over again, when they are dealing with things from an emotional perspective. And we talked about emotionally immature parents before, but you may find this sort of thing going on with emotionally immature parents also. You may find that you are trying to talk to people and trying to be nurturing and supportive, but if they're in a child state, then they're going to want immediate comforting. They're not going to want directions, and they're not going to want logical adult support. They need logical adult support, but they may be very much locked into their child state because of whatever's going on with them. That is, again, what we've learned from authority figures and other parents that we've had. That this where the parent state comes from. The adult state is rational, it is objective, it's data driven, it's more mature. The child state is spontaneous, and it may be something that is harkening back to an earlier stage of your development. We will talk about the inner child at some point also, but at this point you may realize that your inner child has kicked in, and back to the concept of being triggered, something has happened that has brought out that ego state in you, and you are no longer coming from the adult place. You may be coming from the inner child place. And sometimes that inner child is not very well developed emotionally, having gotten poor examples from parents. And again, emotionally immature parents will result in a person who is locked more into a child ego state because they do not know how to move up with any facility. They have not received nurturing, and they cannot move very easily into the parent ego state. I know all this is technical sounding, but think about it. When you're in a relationship with somebody and an argument erupts, it's generally over something that is needs based. They say the most common argument in a couple is over money, and that's probably related to something that somebody wants, and the other person is trying to be logical or mature about it and is not able to get through, because if you're dealing with what somebody needs and what somebody wants right now, you may find yourself going up into a parent state and saying, well, we just can't do that. And that's a shutdown. That's a put down. It doesn't result in effective communication. We communicate with language, and probably in the next podcast, I'll talk about what language means in communication and in therapy and why we need to examine that. But when people are coming from one ego state and dealing with you in a different ego state, you have to be aware, and you don't want to call them a child, but think to yourself, this is coming from a place of being kind of needy. This is coming from a place of wanting something. This is coming from an emotionally unfulfilled place. I'm going to try to bring this person up by saying, wow, okay, can we put aside thought, feelings for a moment, take a breath, and just really talk about the realistic ways of looking at this. And sometimes you have to come from the parent place and being nurturing and supportive if you're dealing with someone who's really triggered. Tell me about it. You sound like you're really upset, and I'm really not sure what's going on, but I want to help you. Please talk to me about what's going on. So the parent ego state is not always about bad things. It's not always about rules. All too often it is, but sometimes it is also about caring and nurturing and support. If you've had good role models in that area, you'll know what I mean. If you have not had good role models, with some empathy and with some practice, odds are you've picked it up somewhere along the way. You've had friendships, you've had other relationships, you've had ways to develop that sort of nurturing ability. Thank you for holding space. Again, I want you to subscribe, like, and leave questions, comments. You can email if you don't want to leave something in public space, and I will get back to you as soon as I can, and we will try to address those questions and concerns. If you have any suggestions for things you would like to see this podcast address, please let me know. Again, I'm Dr. Christopher Barker. Thank you for holding space.